Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Good Grief. My name is Dr. Christine Malone, and in this podcast, we talk about trauma, tragedy, and survival. In each episode, I will interview someone that has gone through grief in some way, and we will discuss the impact it has had on their life. By sharing these stories, we hope that others won't feel alone should they be going through similar situations. Enjoy. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for today's podcast. My guest today is going to tell us a story about her job, where she was, and how it became a toxic work environment, and how that all progressed and what's happened to her since then. So, guess if you would just kind of give us some background on, kind of what did you like about the work you were doing? What did it bring to you personally? What was your benefit there?
I felt I was making a real difference in people's lives and helping them progress in their lives. It was a lot of the people I worked with. I built a team that I hired and I enjoyed working with. They enjoyed working with me. So I felt really good. I felt good that I enhanced the image of the organization.
Now, how long were you there?
I was there for 12 years.
12 years. And tell us about, a little bit about, how did it become, kind of environment where it just changed so much and you just couldn't do it anymore? What all was going on?
Well, I went from having many successes to one day, all of a sudden having everything taken away, not being able to communicate with the team, having goals totally flip, and not done in a friendly way, done in a very toxic way.
Not professional, not very professional.
Not professional.
So you didn't see that coming at all?
Did not see that coming.
Wow. Okay. So now you chose to lose. You didn't or leave. You didn't get laid off or fired. You chose to leave. Is that right?
Yes, but I don't know what you would call it, but it was, I would say, a layoff in a way, meaning if I probably, because everything changed, that actually even legally is considered being fired or laid off.
Okay, I got you.
Because everything changed.
Yeah. So I know we talked about kind of how this ties into the grief, steps of grief and so on. And you've listed, kind of disbelief because you weren't given reasons for the situation. So when you, and I'm sure you've asked, why is it happening, or why is this coming away from me, or whatever. You just didn't get answers, or it was just kind of, well, that's just the way it is now, or how did that go?
Some of it was just they changed direction and changed what their goals were. But I do think that for your listeners here, I do think it's important to know that, it's better for an employer to be inclusive and be upfront. And if they would have said, goals change, things change, what could we do together to end up being able to still meet your needs and meet the organization's needs? But that's not what happened. It was, this was done. These are the changes.
Yeah. I mean, when I think about that, I'm thinking that if that had happened, and correct me, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, that you could have come to the decision, that really isn't a fit for me anymore, or something. And then maybe I'm not here anymore, rather than make it intolerable so that I leave, right? I could have been, and you would be leaving feeling, well, I've done my stuff there, given my benefits, whatever, but I'm, going to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for you had mentioned this about legal action. So I'm guessing from some of the things you've said that you probably had some cause for legal action. So did you choose to do that or not do that?
I chose not to. For again here, and I know you have listeners all around the world, but here in this state and many states, you're an at-will employee.
Yeah.
And so it's really tough to really do legal action unless you're in a protected group. And I was what you'd consider a borderline protected group because of my age, but it was not strong enough to have legal action.
Yeah.
So it's, I feel that sometimes I feel that I wish it wasn't so strongly at will.
Yeah.
I wish employers could have certain situations where they do need to, especially if age discrimination is huge.
Yeah. It is. It is.
And, after a certain age, should it be at will? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. I
But, but that is such a big picture
yeah.
for me personally. I did talk to an attorney, but he didn't recommend that I have legal action. It did help to use legal terms when I talked to him on negotiating the exit situation.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it just it would have been too much for probably not a lot of gain, and actually
Yeah.
it would have probably been more grieving if it would have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely understand that. I had a situation myself where I was discriminated against for healthcare reasons a few years back, and it clearly documented and so obvious. And I consulted an attorney as well, and was told I had a solid case. And but I was recovering from the healthcare situation I was in, and my thought was, why would I don't want to do this. I don't want to put myself in this space where I've got all this stress and everything going on, and really all I wanted was an apology. And I remember my attorney saying to me, "You're never going to get an apology. No one's going to apologize to you." And so I've had to kind of get to that point where I'm like, it's all about me and my zen, if you will, and my peace and so on. And even though I know I was right, and you're right, sometimes the path of peace is better than trying to do something like that. Because anyway, it's just I totally get that. I just want I totally get that. So I know you said something like you were trying to leave with your dignity, and it kind of sounds like you were able to do that because you had it was on your terms, and so on. It wasn't like you fought and screamed and said, "No, I'm staying, I'm staying." You decided to go when it was time for you to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I left with dignity. I think I tried to wrap things up.
Yeah,
I almost didn't deserve it, but I did
yeah,
leave it with dignity.
yeah. But
But
that shows about your character. It really does, right? I mean, if you think about it, I remember a job I left and I gave them 8 weeks notice, which of course I didn't need to give them 8 weeks notice, but I didn't want to burn the bridge for one thing, and secondly, I
mm-hmm.
thought I'm better than this thing. I'm gonna leave here and have people go, Christine was this or that and the next thing, but they're not going to find fault in me and how I left. So I think that's probably what you're saying here too.
Yeah, and I know, and you handle a lot of grief topics, and jobs are sometimes where people think of grief
Yeah,
and job loss, but it is.
it is.
It's who you define yourself to be. It's so much of what your persona is. It's what people view you as and what your title or what your position is.
Yeah.
So, but it's one of those where it's even different than if someone loses their spouse, everybody can reach out to them. Oh, you feel so bad for them. And even though they may, uh, people need to learn on how to better approach that person. In a job loss, no one wants to really hear the negative parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They don't want to hear a negative part about an organization. They don't want to uh, discuss it in that way.
Yeah.
And for the person that was either laid off or fired or left under some kind of duress, that you mentioned burning bridges. And, whether you end up still working someday or trying to find another job or whatever you're planning on doing, to disparage an organization
Mhm.
is just frowned upon in our society.
It is. It
So
is. I mean,
it, it,
I know in some cases I'll be like, I wouldn't recommend this organization, but you'll never hear me badmouth them. It's like I'm not going to do that because
right,
I'm better than that, and that's kind of
right.
where I'm hearing from you too. So, another thing I wanted to point out too is I'm not sure if this is a case with you, but I have my three best friends. We call them my besties. Are all three people I've met in the workplace. So, we spend a lot of time, especially pre-COVID when we're actually in an office,
Mhm.
with the people that we work with. We go to lunch, we go have a coffee, we get to know one another, we get to know your kids' names, your daughter's getting married, whatever's going on, and we become friends. And so for me, thankfully, with my besties, I still keep in touch with them quite often, but I miss that about some of the jobs I've left. I miss some of the people, and I think to myself, gosh, I wish I could see so and so again, or whatever. I don't miss the job, but I miss the people, and that's kind of a grieving point for me too when I think about it that way. Is that kind of where you've been too?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's when a job loss is really quite the loss. I mean, as I said, I think people dismiss it oftentimes, and it is the loss because you're losing what your life was like.
Right.
And it's the same thing, like I said, when you lose a friend, a spouse, you're losing your life. It's not just the person. And so your life is those people you worked with,
Right.
and you lose it. And yes, just like me, I've been in contact with a few, but is it the same? No, it's a few, not maybe the second level friends. Uh,
Yeah.
it's and in my case, I can't think of anyone that I would consider I was really close to that hasn't still kept in contact. They've been doing good.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure for many others, and they drop off,
Yeah.
and not any fault of that person. It's just they have their own lives to live, and they're working, and so things change. So
Yeah.
it's uh it's challenging.
It
It's really
can be.
challenging.
And as I shared before we started recording, the Facebook memories. So I was looking at my Facebook memories this morning, and one of the memories from 8 or 9 years ago was a workplace memory, and it was a bunch of us sitting around a table at lunchtime. Somebody must have been retiring. I don't know why we were all around this table in a restaurant at lunchtime, but I just got this sense of melancholy, like, oh, I remember that day, and it was like I was grieving the loss of that, and I thought because
Mhm.
those days were happy days. Went back when I remember this place, and it was like, oh, I remember working with so and so and so on and so forth. So I totally get that. It's kind of like when those memories come up, it's almost as melancholy as when a memory comes up for something that as a person I've lost, or my child has grown enough where he doesn't, help me decorate the tree anymore. And I remember the days when he did, those kinds of things where it's like, oh, I miss those days. So I get it. I get it. It's kind of like you do think about it in that way. It's about,
Mhm.
what do we do, collaborating with people. I mean, I can think of jobs where it's just, I feel like I did some really great stuff. And I'm sure you could say the same, where it's like, I really did some great stuff. And in this case, and it sounds like, and I know in many cases, to not feel recognized for that, or
Mhm.
to not have someone say, we really appreciate all this stuff that you've done, but the role has changed, right? Instead it's just whatever it was that just became toxic, and you needed to go, and so on. So I think that's a big deal, because I'm all about, life is short, and spending it doing stuff I don't want to do is not something I'm interested in doing. I didn't realize that till I was well into my 40s, but I did actually get there. So that's helpful. So how have you been doing since you left that job? I know you started a new endeavor, so I guess that kind of filling some of the space for you to make you feel more like I'm back to giving back to the community. I'm back to, doing something that's really worthwhile.
Yes, I mean, I have a number of new endeavors I'm working on, and so I'm making progress. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still, still, if I try and tell a few close friends, not the general public, exactly what happened, I still get, I sort of really understand the whole PTSDs because I start shaking,
Mm,
quivering. It was traumatic. And
yeah.
so, it was hard to get over that part. I don't think I ever will able to talk about it in great detail without
Emotions. Yeah.
having that situation. But I am a positive person, which helps. And been able to think of other ways to go in, but to have the same type of job in a different location, I don't think I could do again.
Mm, wow. Yeah. And one thing I made me think about a couple comments ago when you were talking about talking to people about job loss and how it's grieving. I can think of a couple times where I run into someone and said, hey, are you still working at XYZ? And that, no, I'm not there anymore. And it's kind of like, I kind of go, oh, should I not mention this anymore? It's almost like I'm uncomfortable now. It's like if you like sometimes with loss, if I say, well, I've just got divorced. I remember that happened to me one time where somebody asked me, how's so and so doing? And I was like, I'm sure we got divorced. And he was like, oh, you could tell he was like, oh my gosh, I wish I could step back. How do I step back? And it's like, it's not, it's life, right? Just life. It's life. And if I say I'm not there anymore, I'm not there anymore. Doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad. Might have been my choice, might have been their choice, but it's what it is. And so I think that's part of what I'm hearing from you is that whole people don't want to talk about it, don't really want to hear it. And yeah, and for a lot of us, I know, especially I mean, you're near my age group. When we think about the work we do, that's who we are, a lot of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so to say to someone, I'm not there anymore, it's kind of like, well, now I feel like I have to justify that I'm still valuable and I'm still this and I'm still that, rather than, thinking to myself, why am I doing this? But I think that's pretty common. It's sort of like I have to still say, yes, but I'm still doing this, and now I'm doing this. I have to really quickly add in there all these wonderful things that I'm doing, so it doesn't sound like I'm sitting here in my misery, self-pity, whatever it might be. So I don't know why that is about people, especially women. But I would like to know, so if you had someone listening to this and they are either, first let's talk about if they're in a toxic work environment. What advice would you give them if they're in this space and it's clear they're not being treated well, and their job is not, I mean, they're going home, they're stressed, they're drinking too much, they're fighting with their spouse, whatever, from the stress of the job. What kind of advice would you offer for that kind of person?
Leave.
Get out. Get out. That movie Get Out
Get
came to
out.
asking that. Yeah.
And this is a difficult topic,
Mm-hmm.
but this whole idea that no one wants to hear about what the situation really is. I do believe that companies and organizations are getting away with treating people poorly.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And I really admire the people behind the Me Too movement because they called them out on it. That's hard to do,
It
really
is.
hard. So when people make fun of the situation, I've heard people make fun of it, and that's not real and it's not. Oh, yes, it is. For
Mm-hmm.
them to be courageous enough to stand up and trying to call out a company is really hard.
Yeah,
And
it
they
is.
know it just can destroy their lives. And I've read many stories where it has destroyed
Yeah. And I
their
know
lives.
many organizations today actually will do like a non-disclosure agreement. We're going to give you a severance
Yep.
package of X weeks in lieu of you cannot say anything negative about this
Right.
company. So
Right.
kind of like a malpractice suit. It kind of reminds me of that, where it's
Yeah.
like, well, we'll settle this claim, but you have to not talk about it at all because we don't want
Right.
us, whatever. Which almost like bribery, if you ask me. But that's part of that too.
Yeah. And so if you look at Me Too was in a small portion of the improper behavior of a company and the employees in that company,
Mhm.
executives, I should say, in that company.
Right.
It's so much broader than that. That's really what's out there.
It is.
No employee really should be yelled at. No
No.
employee should be not included and discuss a situation that could be changing.
Yeah.
And there's so many instances of it. I honestly am not sure what to do about it. I, again, people don't really want to hear about it. And so it just stays underground. And that's a shame. I think that somehow or another that just like it's wrong to have domestic abuse,
Yeah.
verbally, even, not just physically,
Yep.
it's wrong for companies and organizations and executives that have power, just like in domestic abuse, a
Mm-hmm.
spouse has the power to be able to have that abuse. Executives have the power over your financial life, your family life, because your family's counting on you. And to me, it's just wrong. So my advice to people that are in a situation is try and leave. I wish there was better solutions than just that, but that's really the only solution right now.
I think for some people, it feels like,
So
I've been here for a while, right? Or I'm 60 now. And so who's going to hire me, right? So those kinds of things come into play where it's like, I feel stuck. I got to stay here because I'm stuck. And I know that I'm
right.
talking about relationships, jobs, whatever, but I'm stuck. I can't leave because where else am I going to go? However, I know I actually had a conversation with a lady the other day who was telling me how she used to work 7 days a week for this company. And she was a personal assistant and she worked 12, 15 hours a day. And one day the boss came to her and asked her to add on more. And she said, I just can't do it. I don't have the ability to do it. So he fired her. So, and she was devastated because she thought, I'm doing such great work. Well, she was clearly overworked and so on. What she did was she got involved in some artwork. And now she's a very successful artist doing what she loves to do. And she would never have done that if it wasn't for
Yeah.
leaving that toxic job, and which she would have stayed there because she was just doing it. But and she said to me, I was like in my 60s at the time. I was thinking, what am I going to do? Um, and I decided to try this new artwork, and it has been highly successful for her. So sometimes I think that push out the door, whether we make the jump or not, actually ends up really well. And I know, like you'd mentioned, some of the wonderful things you're working on now. You would not likely have thought of doing that or even have the time to do that because you had this other job that was, taking a lot away from you. So yeah, I'm yeah, that kind of what comes to mind for me
I,
is
I agree. I mean, I think when I say leave, it is that, be courageous.
yeah,
You can reinvent yourself. You could just find another job. Um, and a little bit is job does sometimes become our life, and keep the perspective that isn't.
yeah,
It's
yeah, I
it's
know,
just
yeah,
one piece of you, not all of you. And so make sure you keep that in mind, and that yes, your job may define you, but that's really not the better way to go. The better way to go is to know that whatever your passions are, whatever your goals are, that defines you, your values, that defines you. And you should try and, like your example, find what your passion is and try and do something new, or find a company that maybe meets your values better.
right,
But I don't think anybody should try and be in a situation where they're feeling not appreciated,
yeah, yeah,
denigrated,
yeah,
and worse off, yelled at.
yeah. No, that's
Yeah, that it's time to go.
not a
And
space for anyone to
it's
live.
hard. It's really hard. It's I just like you, I've been divorced. It's very traumatic, but if you're in a situation that isn't working for you, life is too short.
It is. And one of
It's
my
too
favorite
short.
sayings, one of my favorite sayings is you don't know how unhappy you are until you're not unhappy anymore. And that has certainly raised its head with me a number of times in my life. And
Yeah.
so kind of that introspective thinking about what am I feeling about what I'm going through right now, and could I do something different rather than I'm just going to sit here and just do it till I die. Because for many people in many organizations, we're just a number, right? We're just someone who, you could be replaced, right? And I've had employers and say that, well, I could replace that person in a heartbeat. I'm thinking that it's a person. That's a person who brings value and the culture here and so on. But they could be replaced in a heartbeat. It's kind of makes you
Yeah.
wonder, again, I don't know, business is business, and a lot of organizations that's, they're all about the business, but I find it's few and far between when I hear stories from people today about employers who are genuinely caring about their employees, all right, and genuinely caring, like, offer them give them a Christmas card, for example, or something, just something that's just tells you that I'm not just a number. You're actually thinking about me. Take me to lunch on my anniversary date, or whatever, recognize my birthday. Those are big deals for a lot of people, and it's like I said, it's very few and far between these days, and that's unfortunate. Maybe I've just been around for so long that things were very different in all the years of my career earlier on. It was great, but Christmas parties, whatever. I remember all kinds of fun things with former employers that just don't happen anymore. So,
Well,
so
I think that I really have two messages here, and one's to company and organization executives. research shows you retain employees more, you actually have financial performance is higher when you treat your employees with respect.
Yep.
And you include them and you show you care.
Yep. I mean, I
And
blogs about that.
so, so if any of you listeners are company organization executive, please keep in mind, it's not just that you're trying to be nice, it's actually better performance for your company or organization.
Yep.
And the second message is for anybody who's lost a job, it is grieving. And don't take it lightly. Give yourself time to grieve just like you have any other kind of loss, and allow yourself to do that. And I really empathize with people that do have job loss, even more so now, but all along I just think that we all just just don't think it's as important, and it is. It's just it's I understand it's not at the level of losing someone who's really close to you, but it's still an important part of your life.
Right.
And your life changes no matter what, your life changes, and it is grief and it
Yeah.
is loss.
Yeah. And I mean, in some cases, I've actually worked, I remember working when I was early in college years with a man who had his master's degree in something, and he was let go from his job, and he needed to make money. So he ended up coming to work for where we were working in retail at the time. I remember we're all thinking, what's he doing here? He's overqualified and so on. And I thinking back on that now, because of course I was 20 something at the time. I'm thinking how horrible that must have been for him. He needed to take something, and what his self-worth must have been like. But he had to make income, and if that was working at J.C. Penney's at the time, then that's what it was. And that I can think, like I said, looking back on it now, I'm thinking, boy, that had to be difficult for him because his job, just whatever it was he was doing, wasn't there anymore. So I get that, and I definitely think that is a sense of grieving, especially when you think about, if you've got a job where you feel like I'm really doing something. I know I've had several jobs that I feel like, wow, I really created something amazing here, and I'm proud of that, right? So then to not have that anymore, if that's the situation, makes you feel like, well, now, or in some cases, I know for me, one job that I left was, I felt like the project that I'd put together was like my baby, and now someone else has charge of this project, and it had my name on it, and I was proud of, those kinds of things where it's like, oh, now where's this going to go, and are people going to go, oh, that's the thing that Malone created, and now it's crap or whatever, and that hits me too, and I'm thinking that's not my responsibility. I've had to let that go as well. So I also would point out there's always room, and of course I work in education, so I'm always all about, there's room for going back to school, learning something new. I've had students that are in their 60s that are coming back to learn something new. It's like you're never too old to learn. So for people, that are thinking this might be my time to get into a new industry, there's always something like that to look into. What do you like? I've always wanted to work in healthcare. Great. Come to school, right? Those types of things are a lot of, and I think that loss of the job is the kind of impetus that puts them there. It's like, I wouldn't have done it. I'd have stayed here forever in this space, except for now I'm out, and now I've got to find a new door to open. And I think that can be a positive, but you do have to give yourself that grace and that time with the grieving. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's extremely important. It's not like you just move from one to the next and don't miss it, right? Because you miss it. But I get that. Was there anything else you'd like to share before we end today?
No, just thank you so much for having me here. And, just to repeat for anybody out there, treat your ones that are close to you that have lost a job, that it is a grieving process, and treat them as such. And also treat yourself that it is a loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Give yourself that time for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Grief. To hear more about my personal story, please pick up a copy of my book, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival, available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible via Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online book retailers.